It is June 14th, 2024, and the one with the funniest accent is back from Ireland, so technical difficulties now are mitigated. You will get your videos on time. Online today, we got Dr. Tyler Carr, Dr. Dave Shetlar, and the inimitable Pam Sherratt. We are looking at hellscape for the next 2 weeks. So a lot of discussion this morning focused on watering, managing things through this period of time. So to start us off, Dr. Tyler Carr.
I think hellscape's a good word for this. And this past week, it's been relatively dry in most of the state. This is just 7-day observed precipitation. You can see up in the Cleveland area, there's been some sporadic rain, but that blue is just over half-inch of rain. So I haven't been getting enough rain to meet our ET demands as of late. And this isn't going away. We're already talking about seeing some drought stress in areas in the Columbus and Cleveland areas, and I'm assuming we're seeing those in the Southwest Ohio and other areas as well. Temperatures are going to be ramping up, and so we need to address these appropriately. This is forecasted precipitation totals for the next 1 to 7 days. You look at Ohio, you see a lot of green. That means we're going to probably in most of our areas get less than a half-inch of rain, with temperatures going to be above normal in the 1 to 7 day range. This is the 8 to 14 day range. It looks like it's here to stay for a little while, with not a ton of relief in sight. High temperatures in the 90s, low temperatures going to be upper 60s, 70s, depending on where you are. This kind of reminds me of back home, back in Arkansas, trying to manage some cool season turf, and things are really going to start slowing down. If you can't irrigate, you're really going to start to see a lot of drought stress. This is a time where if you don't need to mow, well, you probably won't need to mow because it won't be growing very much. But if you can stay off of the turf, do it. Any stress that you add on it from mowing or making applications of things like fertilizers are going to create more stress. So this time of year, we typically have a decrease in growth. We have our growth periods primarily in the spring and the fall. We're in this lull during the summer. With the high temperatures, this drop is going to be even lower. I would assume that it's going to be even low, probably down to about 50%, maybe even 30% or lower of growth potential. And so the turf's not growing. I know we have traffic in areas. We probably shouldn't be fertilizing them with quick release sources, because if they're not growing, they're not expending these nutrients that we would need to apply. If you can apply primarily a slow release fertilizer source, I know that's not applicable really for greens, but slow release fertilizer sources, just so something can be in the soil whenever the turf is whenever the weather's in a position where you can have more growth, that will be helpful. Just looking ahead for forecasted reference ET in Ohio, this is for the next 7 days, about a little over 1.6 inches of ET for the week for most places. Some places are higher. So we're going to be anywhere from about 0.22 to a quarter of an inch of ET loss per day. So when you're irrigating, keep that in mind. I know Pam is going to talk about irrigation practices, but this is the time of year where everything that we've done in the spring is really going to slow down, where we've prepped our soils and our roots to withstand some of these stresses. So this is that time where the plant's going to start slowing down a little bit while we go through this stressful period. So I will pass it along to the next one.
Thanks, Tyler. Now, one thing to ask a question, I think I have a rough idea. You know, you're talking about 2/10 to a quarter of an inch of ET. What's our average daily water loss here in Ohio during the summer, approximately?
I would say it's going to be somewhere around 0.15 to 0.17 on a typical summer
So
day.
we're almost 70 to 80% higher, to be cheeky in administrative speak,
Yeah. Yeah, our
than what would be
water,
normal.
yeah, our ET demand is going to be higher. And that's going to affect how you irrigate to prevent runoff and things like that, which Pam is gonna
Yeah.
talk about.
All right. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
Pamela Sherratt.
Good morning, everybody. Talking a little bit about the stress period that we're about to enter into. And Dr. Carr's already mentioned the ET rates and the water loss that we're going to have this week. A general standard rule of thumb for homeowners and for grounds, we've always said, you know, we want to replace about 1 inch of water a week and have an irrigation system program in place that can do that. But I'm already seeing areas of high traffic on grounds and sports fields and even in people's lawns where they've got bare soil. If you've got areas that you've renovated this spring and you've got bare soil, those areas are already really dried out and really hard and compacted, and they're not going to take water in. As a rule of thumb, we only apply water as fast as it can infiltrate the soil. And so if you have a scenario of a sports field where you've got sidelines, goal mouths, high traffic areas where you see some bare soil, keep in mind that applying 1 inch of water in one go is not going to be effective. We're going to end up with a lot of waste, especially if you have a field with a crown or a lawn with a slope. Watering at this time of year, you need to closely monitor those types of areas to make sure that sort of every drop of water that you apply is going into the soil and can infiltrate into the soil. We don't want runoff for a number of reasons. It's a waste of money, a waste of water. The turf grasses aren't going to be able to utilize it. And from an optics standpoint, we don't want the public seeing that we're applying turf to areas where the water's running off into the parking lot or the road or anything like that. So make sure that we are watering efficiently, and that where we apply water, it's actually getting into the soil. Best time of day is obviously early morning. If we put anything out in the afternoon, the evaporation rate is so high that water is lost through evaporation. We talk about 1 inch of water a week. It may need to be a little bit higher this week to offset the amount of evaporation that we're going to have. And again, may have to apply more frequently to offset that runoff. So early in the morning, right now we have no water restrictions across the state, I believe. We don't have any watering restrictions. That might change in the next 2 weeks. So we'll update you again next Friday and future turf team times on whether we see any restrictions in the state. And so early in the morning to avoid evapotranspiration rate, to avoid that evaporation from the surface. Early evening, we don't apply in the afternoons because of the evaporation rates, and we strongly discourage homeowners getting home from work and watering heavily after dinner. And with that, I'll leave it at that, and I'll let Dr. Nangle discuss that topic later. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Pamela. Yes. Now, flower beds. That is.
Oh, sorry, I had one more thing to mention. Before I know that you're going to mention wetting agents, Ed, but I also wanted to mention people that are on a plant growth regulator schedule. A lot of the plant growth regulator labels will clearly state that you don't apply them when it's over 80 degrees. So, you know, be really careful with any kind of regulation applications you're putting out. If next week was supposed to be the window to avoid that rebounding growth, just be careful, especially if you have sporadic irrigation or anything. I've seen scenarios on campus where a growth regulator has been applied in hot weather and then the irrigation has gone down and it's not pretty. So something else to think about.
Well, I think, Pam, one point that should be raised is that doing a lot of things when temperatures above 90 degrees on cool season grass is going to lead to not pretty, right? So this is one example of the time of year where you might need to just sit back with a pina colada and watch it, because doing anything else to it ain't going to be much help. Tyler, you want to add
And
to that?
yeah, and enjoy reduced mowing frequency. Enjoy not having to crank the mower up because
If
it's going to
this
be
is the
hot.
time that you tell your neighbor, don't do it, you tell your neighbor, don't do it. I have one right now who cut it last week, and it's brown turning white, meaning he's putting in a new lawn in the fall, right? He's not going to get through this. I don't care whether your grass is 4 inches, 5 inches, or 5.5 inches. If you're measuring it that precisely, leave it alone. It's going to come out of it a whole lot better than trying to get it back down to 3 inches. And so, a couple of things. Mowing next week, forget about it. Don't do it. Not useful. And as Tyler just pointed out, not going to help. Going on to the wetting agents. For those of you who are skeptical about using wetting agents on the professional side, this is absolutely going to show you why you need to use them. The dry weather and the heat is going to lead to hydrophobic soil conditions. And what you're going to have a problem with is not just drought development, but the inability to re-wet the soil after this passes. You are going to be kicking dust. It is going to be very difficult to get that water to penetrate. So wetting agent use has to happen, not just today. It needs to be used in a regular basis ahead of these types of periods of time. So if you're going to start the wetting agent program, depending on the program or the product, it might require applications every 2 weeks. It might require applications every 4 weeks, as per the label states, but that needs to be started in May. Now, there are wetting agent type products available to homeowners. Some of them are actually organic based, if that's where you want to go. The yucca plant has shown some propensity to aid with this. In places like the Devil Strip or the patch that's between the pavement and the road, those are places that would really benefit from the use of wetting agents, and for multiple reasons, not just the idea of stopping or reducing hydrophobic or extreme drought in the soil, but you're also going to improve your irrigation efficiency. Water is not going to run off and literally run down the road. It's going to percolate and penetrate into the soil much more efficiently in these situations. Other things to keep in mind. So going back to the timing of irrigation applications that Pam brought up, and following up a little bit on Dr. Carr's comment last week, if you have older tall fescue lawns, and I mean 10 to 15 years old, there is so many cultivars coming out yearly now that these changes are extremely dramatic in responses. But if you're deciding you need to irrigate it at 6 or 6:30 point because you're like, well, I want to watch the baseball and yada yada yada, I've had dinner and I don't want to waddle around, don't. All you're doing is creating more problems. Data show, yeah, there you go. Dr. Carr's got a beautiful explosion of brown patch. Data show, particularly 12 hours of leaf wetness will enhance brown patch activity. Further to that, now nighttime temperatures are going to be in the 70s, right? And so while it's a little bit early in the year and some of the more experienced golf course superintendents will say, nah, we're dry, homeowners who soak their lawns are going to leave themselves open to another water mold called Pythium, particularly if you have seeded in the springtime. And this is one of the reasons that we strongly recommend putting grass seed in lawns in the fall, because when we run into these situations, overwatering causes greater amounts of problems. Further to that, certain classes of fungicides probably want to be used with caution. So the DMI fungicides are known to have growth regulating capacity. Pam mentioned the use of growth regulators in high temperatures. Putting down DMI fungicides, particularly some of the older chemistries, is going to be a no-no next week. The newer chemistries, I've tested Max Steam at 90 degrees. I've tested some of the other products at those warmer temperatures and we don't see it. However, I would still err on the side of caution for using DMI fungicides next week if you must. And in reality, the temperatures next week are going to suppress leaf spot, dollar spot, any of the traditional diseases that we might see this time of year. What you want to be watching next week is your soil temperatures. because things like fairing, things like take all patch, things like summer patch really are going to benefit from these temperatures. And so if you haven't put down preventive soil treatments, then you're going to need to scout for those problems, because soil temperatures are going to easily surpass 80 to 83 degrees, which will cause problems. Dr. Gardner's not online today, but he did make sure to say also applying herbicides after 9 a.m. next week is a no-no. Right? Now, it'll be super effective on everything, right? You're going to kill everything if you apply at 95 degrees plus. So if you need to do that, have at it. But I don't suspect most people are wanting to do that. Other than that,
Ed, I wanted to mention that on our Buckeye Environmental Horticulture team meeting on Tuesday, we had a tremendous number of images all across the state on growth regulator herbicide damage to trees and shrubs. We are quite sure it is not due to lawn care. Most of these were near agricultural fields, and because of the Roundup issue, a lot of the agricultural farmers have switched to even things like 2,4-D and some of the other regular growth regulators, and they were doing it. They often hired out some of these spray companies that were doing it in high temperatures, and it appears to have drifted in some cases maybe even a quarter of a mile to influence plants. So if you do have a customer that expresses a complaint that their plants are curling up in their landscape, and if you're within an eyesight of an agricultural field, it probably was not you. So be aware of that, and be cognizant that the chemistry in the agricultural fields have changed dramatically.
good point, Dave. Now, one other thing to make sure of, if you're making any type of fungicide or particularly insecticide application, and Dave will lead on with this, make sure to water it in as soon as possible, particularly in these bright conditions. Those products can be labile or light labile, and will degrade a little bit more quickly with that high light intensity. With that, Dr. Shetlar.
Hey, I had one thing to add to water in those wetting agents too. Because they can be very phytotoxic if not watered in.
All I wanted to mention today is that the bluegrass bill bug, that's primarily in Kentucky bluegrass, but can also attack perennial ryegrass and tall fescue, that doesn't have an endophyte, that the larvae are down feeding on the crowns, possibly even pupating. So they can cause the turf, especially in high cut turf, to look like it's going into dormancy. So if you've got a lawn or even a sport field that you think is going into dormancy a little bit earlier than it should, get off your cart or get out of your car, go over to the turf, get out on your hands and knees, do that tug test, and pull up some of the stems that are turning brown and see if they're hollowed out or they have the billbug frass in them. If it is bill bugs, about the only recourse that you have right now, we don't have a curative insecticide that will do any good at this time. You will need to water and hope that there's enough energy in the turf grass to spread some new tillers out and fill in that. Otherwise, you may have to just plan on reseeding this fall if it's really extensive damage. Other thing that we're seeing, several of the sod webworm species, the adults are flying right now. Homeowners always get concerned. They're out mowing their lawn. They see these little buff-colored moths flying up out of their turf, and they want to know what you're going to do about it. And the answer is nothing. In high-cut turf, sod webworms are not an issue. It's only on the shortcut turf of golf course greens and tees that they can have a problem. And hopefully most of the golf course superintendents have already put down their caterpillar insecticides for the season. The diamides are the best choice for that. And prevent any of the caterpillar outbreaks. Speaking of caterpillar outbreaks, one of our agricultural entomologists pointed out that they're seeing several fields that have major common armyworm. That's the native species of armyworm, really with impressive populations. That means they're going to pupate right now and probably emerge as new adults next week and the following week. And they're going to be looking for grass type areas to lay their eggs. And so we do have the potential for our native armyworm to have outbreaks in our turf in about 3 weeks. And so just sort of a heads up, if you've got a customer in 3 weeks that calls you and says, my lawn disappeared last night, that's a common armyworm. We have not seen any fall armyworms yet, and I haven't heard much from the southern folks that the fall armyworms are building up a big population like they did a couple of years ago that we had that major outbreak. So that's the bug update for this week.
Thanks, Dave. Folks, the problem, of course, is the heat, and not just the grass. It's also the humans that you are working with and working for you. So make sure everybody is coated in sunscreen, fully hydrated, and wearing all the appropriate attire, because that is equally important. Safety for all aspects of life at this stage is going to be something that we need to be very cognizant of over the next couple of weeks. With that, we will let you all go. Reminder, the website buckeyeturf.osu.edu is the place to go for all of the latest information. We have our email address there if you need to reach out to us, and we do get emails across the group, and we are responsive, believe it or not. And then we have on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, both OSU Turf and OSU Turf, and then the podcast. We send those links out as well. Again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out, folks. We will see you next week. And yes, we are going to be back on a more regular schedule at this stage. Thank you.